A forgotten birthday, a golden child, and a life-changing lottery ticket. When Hannah finally chooses herself, her family refuses to let go. Now, she must decide, run, fight, or carve her own path before it's too late. Hi everyone, welcome to Revenge Echo. Let's get started. The sound of excited squeals and laughter drifted up from our driveway, cutting through the quiet of the morning. I stood at the kitchen window, coffee mug warming my hands, watching my younger sister, Sophie, jump up and down beside a brand new red Volkswagen Beetle, complete with an enormous silver bow on top. My parents beamed as they handed her the keys, their faces glowing with pride. My name is Hannah, and this was the moment I realized I'd always be the afterthought in my family story. I had seen favoritism play out in subtle ways before, missed acknowledgments, smaller gifts, dismissive comments about my passions. But this was something else. This was a grand gesture, a symbol of everything I lacked in their eyes. Sophie, the golden child, had been rewarded. I, on the other hand, was expected to accept the crumbs of their attention with silent gratitude. Oh my God! I can't believe you guys did this. Sophie's voice carried through the glass. She was already sitting in the driver's seat, running her hands over the steering wheel like it was made of gold. Her joy was genuine, unburdened by guilt or awareness. She had always been the recipient of their best, and she had no reason to question why. I glanced at the stack of scratch-off lottery tickets sitting on the counter, my modest birthday gifts to everyone. They hadn't even bothered to open them yet. The tickets had been all I could afford after putting every spare penny into my pastry school applications. I had spent weeks picking out the ones I thought they might enjoy, imagining the excitement of small wins, the shared laughter as they scratched off numbers together. But trying to explain that to my family would have been pointless. They'd made their opinions about my hobby clear enough. I swallowed down the bitter lump in my throat and turned away from the window. No need to torture myself by watching their celebration. I had work to do. I had a life to plan, one that didn't include waiting for their approval anymore. Hannah, my mother's voice startled me. She was standing in the doorway, still wearing her coat. Why aren't you outside with everyone? Come see your sister's car. I forced a smile. Just finishing my coffee, Mom. She frowned, that familiar look of disappointment crossing her face. You could try being happy for her, you know. This is a big moment. Right. Because I'm the one who makes everything about myself. The words slipped out before I could stop them. Don't start, she warned. Not today. I bit my tongue and watched her head back outside. Through the window, I could see my father showing Sophie how to adjust her mirrors, wearing the proud smile I never managed to earn. My hand drifted to the lottery tickets. Out of habit, I started scratching off the numbers on one, not really paying attention, until something caught my eye. 3 matching numbers. My heart started racing as I double-checked the winning combinations. $50,000. I stared at the ticket, my hands shaking. With this money, I could afford pastry school. I could finally prove to everyone that my hobby was worth something. But this ticket was meant to be a gift. The right thing would be to give it to them, watch them celebrate another stroke of luck that would probably go towards Sophie's college fund or a family vacation I wouldn't be invited on. Outside, Sophie honked the horn playfully, and my parents laughed. None of them had even noticed I wasn't there. I made my decision in that moment. Carefully, I folded the winning ticket and slipped it into my pocket. The rest of the scratch-offs, I gathered up and dropped in the recycling bin. They wouldn't miss what they hadn't bothered to open. I sat motionless on my bed, staring at the winning ticket. My mind raced through the possibilities. For years, I had dreamed of escaping, leaving behind the weight of being overlooked, of being treated like I didn't matter. And now, for the first time, I had a real chance. Within an hour, I had my laptop open to apartment listings, the ticket tucked safely in my wallet. My fingers trembled as I clicked through pages of studio apartments, searching for something I could afford with this sudden windfall. The idea of having my own space, my own life, sent a shiver of anticipation through me. But then doubt crept in. What if they noticed the missing ticket? What if they came after me, accusing me of taking something that, in their minds, belonged to the family? I hesitated, glancing toward my door, half expecting my mother to barge in and demand answers. But there was nothing. No footsteps, no calls. Just the distant sound of Sophie's laughter outside. I forced myself to keep going. I found a small, affordable studio above a cafe downtown. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I booked an appointment to sign the lease the next day. My heart pounded as I packed a single duffel bag, filling it with the few things that truly mattered: my clothes, my favorite recipe notebook, my set of kitchen knives, and the envelope containing my ticket. The hardest part was walking out that door, knowing they wouldn't even realize I was gone until it was too late. I left a note on the kitchen counter, short and simple. I need space. Don't try to find me. I stood in the hallway for a moment, my breath shallow, waiting for something: guilt, hesitation, fear. But instead, I felt a lightness I had never known. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about getting out. And thanks to their forgotten birthday gift, I finally had my chance. Within an hour, I had my laptop open to apartment listings, the winning ticket tucked safely in my wallet. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about getting out. And thanks to their forgotten birthday gift, I finally had my chance. The key felt heavy in my hand as I unlocked the door to my new apartment. It wasn't much, a studio above a Mediterranean cafe downtown, but it was mine. The smell of fresh pita bread and spiced lamb wafted up through the floorboards, making my stomach growl despite everything. The hum of the city outside felt different, like the beginning of something new rather than the background noise of a life I had no control over. I stepped inside and let the door close behind me, the click of the lock strangely satisfying. The space was small, barely enough for a bed, a tiny kitchenette, and a window overlooking the busy street below. A single overhead light flickered uncertainly as I set my duffel bag on the bare mattress in the corner. I hadn't had time to buy furniture yet, but it didn't matter. This was mine. Every inch of it belonged to me, and no one could take that away. 3 weeks had passed since my birthday, and my phone was still lighting up with missed calls from home. I had left a note explaining I needed space, but that hadn't stopped the barrage of texts from my mother, each one more guilt-laden than the last. "You're being selfish, Hannah. Your sister needs you right now." I dropped my bag and sat on the mattress, staring at the cracked ceiling. The words should have stung, but instead, they felt distant, like echoes from a life I was no longer part of. Was I selfish? Maybe. But for the first time, I was making a choice for myself. I pulled out my knife roll, unwrapping the set carefully. My knives were the most expensive things I owned, gifts to myself over the years. Each one felt like an extension of my hand, precise and familiar. I traced my fingers along the handle of my chef's knife, letting its weight ground me. This was what I was meant to do. This was who I was meant to be. A knock on my door made me freeze. Had they somehow found me? I hesitated before standing, heart pounding as I reached for the knob. I half expected to see my mother or father standing there, arms crossed, disappointment etched into their features. Instead, a tall man in chef's whites, his salt and pepper hair tied back in a short ponytail, stood in the dim hallway. The scent of olive oil and fresh herbs clung to his clothes. "Hello, new tenant." The voice was unfamiliar, heavily accented. "I'm Leo, from downstairs." I opened the door wider, confused. "From the cafe?" He nodded. "I noticed someone moving in. Wanted to introduce myself. We try to keep a family atmosphere here." The word family made me wince, but something about his warm smile put me at ease. There was no judgment in his gaze, no expectation, just curiosity. "You cook?" he asked, his eyes drifting to the knife roll still open on my bed. "I try to." I hesitated before adding, "I'm starting pastry school next month." His expression brightened. "No kidding. We're short-staffed downstairs. Could use someone who knows their way around a kitchen, even part-time." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed again. My father's name flashed on the screen. I ignored it. Leo noticed but didn't pry. Instead, he simply said, "Listen, come down tomorrow morning if you're interested." Sometimes, the best therapy is keeping your hands busy and your knives sharp. He turned to leave, pausing at the stairwell. "And Hannah? Welcome to the neighborhood." I closed the door, pressing my back against it. For the first time in a long time, I felt something close to hope. The key felt heavy in my hand as I unlocked the door to my new apartment. It wasn't much, a studio above a Mediterranean cafe downtown, but it was mine. The smell of fresh pita bread and spiced lamb wafted up through the floorboards, making my stomach growl despite everything. 3 weeks had passed since my birthday, and my phone was still lighting up with missed calls from home. I had left a note explaining I needed space, but that hadn't stopped the barrage of texts from my mother, each one more guilt-laden than the last. "You're being selfish, Hannah. Your sister needs you right now." I dropped my duffel bag on the bare mattress in the corner and started unpacking the few kitchen items I'd brought: my knife roll, a well-seasoned cast iron pan, and the basic essentials. The winning lottery ticket was safely deposited, the money already allocated for pastry school tuition and this apartment's security deposit. A knock on my door made me freeze. Had they somehow found me? "Hello, new tenant." The voice was unfamiliar, heavily accented. "I'm Leo, from downstairs." I opened the door to find a tall man in chef's whites, his salt and pepper hair tied back in a short ponytail. "I noticed someone moving in," he said. "Wanted to introduce myself. We try to keep a family atmosphere here." The word family made me wince, but something about his warm smile put me at ease. After Leo left, I sat on the edge of my mattress, staring at my phone. The screen was still lit with my father's missed call. My chest tightened, but I took a deep breath and let the tension roll off my shoulders. I wasn't going to answer. Not now. Maybe not ever. Instead, I focused on what lay ahead. The idea of working at a real restaurant both thrilled and terrified me. I had spent years in my small home kitchen, experimenting with recipes, practicing techniques I had learned from books and online videos. But this would be different. It would be real. A test of whether I truly belonged in this world or if I had just been fooling myself all along. The night passed in restless anticipation. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the hum of the city outside my window a stark contrast to the quiet suburban nights I had grown up with. I thought about Sophie, about my parents. I wondered if they had even read my note, or if they had just assumed I would come crawling back once my little rebellion burned itself out. But that wasn't going to happen. Morning arrived quicker than I expected, and I found myself standing in front of the cafe downstairs, nervously adjusting my apron. Through the window, I could see Leo moving with practiced ease, flipping something in a pan while shouting instructions to the other cooks. The air smelled of warm spices and freshly baked bread, a scent so inviting it nearly erased my nerves. I stepped inside. The kitchen was alive with movement, chefs shouting orders, pans clattering, steam rising in fragrant clouds. My heart pounded, but I kept my head high. Leo spotted me almost immediately and gestured me over. "Hannah, good, you showed up." He handed me a kitchen towel and pointed toward the prep station. "Let's see what you can do. Start with these. Dice the onions small, even cuts. No tears." I nodded and got to work, falling into a familiar rhythm. Knife in hand, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. This was where I belonged. The tension in my shoulders eased, my focus sharpening. I diced the onions quickly and efficiently, arranging them neatly on the cutting board. Leo glanced at my work and gave a small nod of approval. "Not bad," he said. "You're comfortable with a knife. That's a good start." For the first time in a long time, I felt something close to pride. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed again. My father's name flashed on the screen. I let it ring. "Complicated situation?" Leo asked. "You could say that." He nodded. "Listen, come down tomorrow morning if you're interested. Sometimes, the best therapy is keeping your hands busy and your knives sharp." The next morning, I arrived at the cafe before sunrise. The city was still waking up, the streets damp from a light drizzle overnight. I pushed open the door to the restaurant and was immediately enveloped by the warmth of the kitchen, the scent of baking bread and simmering stock curling around me like a comforting embrace. Leo was already there, rolling up the sleeves of his chef's coat. "Good, you're early," he said with a nod. "That's a good habit. Kitchens don't wait for anyone." I tied my apron tightly and followed him inside. The kitchen was alive in a different way than the night before, calmer, but no less demanding. A steady rhythm of chopping, mixing, and prepping filled the space as the other chefs prepped for the morning rush. I took my place at the prep station, feeling both the excitement and the weight of the moment. "Today, we test your patience," Leo said, dropping a 10-pound bag of flour onto the counter. "We need fresh dough for pastries, bread, and pasta." "That's your job." I nodded, rolling up my sleeves. I had made dough 100 times before, but never under these circumstances. The pressure of working in a real kitchen, under the scrutiny of an experienced chef, made my hands tremble slightly as I reached for the flour. I inhaled deeply, centering myself. I could do this. Flour, eggs, water. Nothing fancy. "But it's about feel," Leo said, watching me closely. "Dough is alive. It needs respect. You rush it, you ruin it. You handle it too roughly, you destroy it. Learn its language." I focused, letting my hands work through the familiar motions. Slowly, the ingredients came together, forming a smooth, elastic dough. I kneaded it with care, feeling its resistance, adjusting the pressure of my hands instinctively. Leo watched, his expression unreadable. "Not bad," he finally said, nodding. "You listen. That's rare." His words sent a spark of pride through me, but I didn't let myself get too comfortable. There was still so much to learn. The morning passed in a blur of movement. I shaped pastries, stretched pasta, helped plate dishes for the first customers trickling in. The more I worked, the more I lost myself in the process. The kitchen was demanding but fair. It didn't care about favoritism or past mistakes. It only cared about results. And I could live with that. At one point, as I was slicing a baguette for a sandwich order, Leo leaned over. "You're good with a knife," he said. "Where'd you learn?" "Practice," I said simply. "I spent a lot of time cooking alone." He studied me for a moment, then nodded. That's not always a bad thing. Lunch rush came and went, and when the last plate had been sent out, I finally exhaled. My arms ached, my feet throbbed, but there was something deeply satisfying about the exhaustion. Leo clapped a hand on my shoulder. "You survived day 1, he said with a rare grin. "Come back tomorrow. Let's see if you survived day 2. I smiled back, the first real smile I had felt in a long time. For the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged somewhere. The next morning, I found myself in Leo's kitchen, kneading dough with more focus than necessary. The rhythmic motion was soothing, familiar. Leo handed me a spoon. "Taste this." "What's missing?" I sampled the sauce. "Salt. And maybe a touch of acid." He smiled. "Exactly. A dish without balance is like a life without purpose." For the first time in a long time, I wasn't looking back. I was moving forward. Weeks passed. Mornings were filled with pastry school, evenings in Leo's kitchen. The more I learned, the more I realized how much I had been held back by waiting for my family's approval. I was growing into my own person, shaping a future that had nothing to do with them. For the first time, I was free. Or so I thought. Then, one evening, Sophie's name appeared on my screen. I hesitated before answering. "Sophie." "Hannah," she whispered. "I need your help." A chill ran down my spine. "What's wrong?" "Mom and Dad, they found out where you are. They're coming. They think you stole from them." I gripped the phone tighter. "Of course they do. Please, Hannah." I told them to let it go, but you know how they are. "Just be careful." The line went dead. My heart pounded in my chest. The peace I had found here, the sense of belonging I had built, it was all about to be shattered. My parents weren't just upset, they were coming to claim what they thought was theirs. I sat on my bed, staring at my phone. Should I run? Pack my things and disappear before they arrived? But no. I was done running. I had built something for myself, and I wasn't going to let them take it away. I took a deep breath and headed downstairs to find Leo. He was at the counter, rolling out fresh pasta, his hands moving with effortless precision. He looked up as I approached, immediately sensing my unease. "Something wrong?" he asked. I hesitated, then decided to tell him everything. About my family. About Sophie. About the lottery ticket and why I had left. By the time I finished, Leo had set down his rolling pin, his sharp eyes studying me carefully. So, they think they own you, he said. I nodded. That's how it's always been. But I won't let them control me anymore. Leo wiped his hands on a towel and leaned against the counter. Good. Then don't. You have a home here, Hannah. If they come, you don't owe them anything. And if they try to intimidate you, well, let's just say I don't take kindly to bullies. His words sent a wave of relief through me. I had spent my life feeling alone, but now, for the first time, I had people who had my back. The next evening, they arrived. I spotted them through the window of the cafe, my father's rigid stance, my mother's tight-lipped frown. Sophie was with them, but she stood slightly apart, her arms crossed as if she didn't want to be there. I braced myself as they stepped inside. The tension in the air was suffocating. Hannah, my father said, his voice cold. It's time to come home. I folded my arms. I am home. My mother scoffed. Enough of this nonsense. We know about the money. That was our ticket. You had no right to take it. I felt my fists clench. It was a birthday gift. You didn't even open it. You didn't care until you realized what it was worth. My father's jaw tightened. You will return it. You will come home and stop this foolishness. Leo stepped out from the kitchen, wiping his hands on his apron. I think the lady made herself clear, he said, his voice deceptively calm. She's not going anywhere. My father turned his glare to him. This is family business. Not anymore, I said, standing my ground. You don't control me. You never did. For the first time, I saw uncertainty flicker in my parents' expressions. Sophie, standing to the side, gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod. She understood, even if she couldn't say it aloud. After a long, tense silence, my parents turned to leave. My mother muttered something under her breath, but I didn't care. They were walking away. I had one. Leo clapped a hand on my shoulder. You did good, kid. Now, let's get back to work. As I stepped back into the kitchen, I realized that for the first time in my life, I had chosen my own path, and I wasn't looking back. Weeks passed. Mornings were filled with pastry school, evenings in Leo's kitchen. The more I learned, the more I realized how much I had been held back by waiting for my family's approval. Then, one evening, Sophie's name appeared on my screen. Hannah, she whispered. I need your help. What's wrong? Mom and Dad, they found out where you are. They're coming. They think you stole from them. My grip on the phone tightened. Of course they do. Please, Hannah. I told them to let it go, but you know how they are. Just be careful. The line went dead. This wasn't over. And if my parents were coming for me, I wasn't going to run. It was time to stand my ground. The tension of the confrontation with my parents lingered in the air long after they left. I could still hear my mother's sharp words echoing in my head, still see the way my father's hands clenched into fists at his sides. But I had stood my ground. That should have been enough to make me feel victorious. And yet, a seed of doubt remained. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling of my small apartment, my mind racing. Sophie had looked at me differently, almost as if she envied me. Had she always wanted to break free too? Would she ever? Or would she be stuck playing the perfect daughter forever? My phone buzzed again. Another message from Sophie. I don't think they'll stop, Hannah. Be careful. I swallowed hard, gripping the phone in my hand. Sophie was right. My parents weren't the kind to let things go. They had built their entire world around control, and they had just lost their grip on me. They wouldn't take that lightly. I needed to be prepared for whatever came next. The next morning, as I stepped into the kitchen, Leo was already waiting for me, his arms crossed. Rough night. I nodded. They're not done with me. Leo sighed and wiped his hands on a kitchen towel. People like that never are. But you've got something they don't. You've got a choice. I took a deep breath and picked up a knife, ready to start my prep work. Then I choose to keep going. He gave me a small, approving nod. Good. Let's get to work. The days turned into weeks and life settled into a fragile kind of normalcy. I threw myself into the kitchen, learning more each day, proving to myself that I had made the right choice. But the fear never fully disappeared. Every time my phone buzzed, I braced myself for another message. Every time a stranger entered the cafe, I wondered if my parents had sent someone to drag me back. One evening, as I locked up the cafe, I caught sight of a familiar figure standing across the street. My breath hitched. It was Sophie. She didn't call out to me, didn't cross the road. She just stood there, watching. Then, after a long moment, she turned and walked away. I wanted to chase after her, to ask what she was doing, what she was thinking. But I stayed rooted to the spot, uncertainty creeping in. Was she here to warn me? Or had she come to bring me back? The next morning, I couldn't shake the image of Sophie standing across the street. The way she had lingered, the hesitation in her posture, it gnawed at me. Was she caught between them and me? Was she hoping I'd make the choice for her? Or was she testing to see if I would break? I carried the weight of that moment with me as I stepped into the kitchen. The scent of fresh dough and simmering sauces should have comforted me, but my mind was elsewhere. Even Leo noticed. "You're distracted," he said as I fumbled a simple pastry fold. I exhaled sharply, setting the dough aside. Sophie was outside the cafe last night. She didn't say anything, just watched me. And then she left. Leo wiped his hands on his apron, studying me. "And what do you think she wanted?" I hesitated. "I don't know." He nodded slowly. "Then maybe it's time you find out." The thought terrified me. But deep down, I knew he was right. If I wanted closure, if I wanted to move forward without always looking over my shoulder, I needed to confront this head-on. That evening, I waited outside the cafe, hoping Sophie would return. Hours passed, and just as I was about to give up, I saw her. She approached cautiously, as if she wasn't sure she was welcome. "Hey," she said softly. "Hey," I replied, heart pounding. Sophie shuffled her feet. "I didn't know if I should come in yesterday. I just needed to see you." "Why?" Her eyes flickered with uncertainty. "Because I don't know what to do. They're still angry, but I don't think I can keep living the way they want me to. Seeing you here, doing what you love, it made me wonder if maybe I could do that too." I studied her carefully. "You can, Sophie. You don't have to be who they want you to be." Tears welled in her eyes, and for a brief moment, I saw my sister as she truly was, not the perfect daughter, not the favorite, but a girl who had been just as trapped as I had been. She took a deep breath. "If I leave, they'll hate me." I reached for her hand. "They already hate me, and I'm still standing. You will be too." She squeezed my hand tightly, her decision wavering in her grip. "I don't know if I'm as strong as you." "You don't have to be," I said gently. "I'll help you." For the first time in years, Sophie smiled, a real, genuine smile. And in that moment, I knew I had made my choice. I had chosen myself, my freedom, my future. But I hadn't lost everything. I had gained something far more important. I had gained the chance to help someone else break free. And this time, I wasn't looking back. This story is about breaking free from toxic cycles, choosing your own path, and finding the courage to stand up for yourself. Hannah's journey teaches us that sometimes the hardest battles are fought not with fists, but with choices. By walking away from what no longer serves her, she finds strength not only for herself, but for others who may be struggling too. If you believe in the power of self-discovery, growth, and second chances, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories.